Hello, everybody, and welcome to session 29 of Mahamudra for the People. Um, yes, everything is working well, and we have no technical difficulties. Everything is beautiful. Um, so I want to thank everyone for taking some time to be here today. And yeah, as we've done up until today, we'll start off with a little bit of practice, about 12 minutes or so. And then in the kind of nature of, um, Mahamudra, I'm going to shake it up a little bit by suggesting that we kind of alternate in and out of practice today, right? So do 12 or 14-minute sessions interspersed with a little bit of song, and I'm going to kind of come back to Tilopa's Mahamudra Upadesha, um, or commonly known as the Ganges Mahamudra, um, for us to explore together. And the reason why I would like to focus a little bit on kind of alternating practice in and out of this is precisely because, at the end of the day, that's what this practice is all about. Engaging in meditation practice, and actualizing the experience of Mahamudra rather than just, talking about it. Talk is good and talk is cheap. And also, it's easy to kind of get a little overly intellectual, and kind of psych ourselves out a little bit by doing that. Um, so let's take about 12 minutes or so. Allow yourself to get as comfortable as you can, and as for the various points of the body, depending on one's ability, sit as comfortably as you can with your back straight. They say that your shoulders should be kind of broad and stretched out a little bit like the wings of a vulture. Your neck tilted down ever so slightly. In this particular case, gaze straight forward. Make sure that you're not clenching your jaw, so allow your jaw to just rest naturally. Allow yourself to breathe in a very natural way. And as you sit, try and sit in this way that really kind of captures the power that's inherent in your being. And if you can, try and allow mind itself to be the anchor. Right? So that means allow yourself to let whatever is happening happen. Very gently holding what's happening and experiencing it, but without any analysis, without any doing, just being. We'll sit like this for about 12 minutes. And slowly bring yourself back to this gathering. Take a little bit of time to check in and see what that was like. I want to see if, to start off with, if anybody has any questions, either left over from last week, and we were discussion about devotion and devotion to, you know, it's typically said devotion to the teacher, right, or devotion to the Lama, and that appearance at the end of the day is the Lama just as much as a person might be. The sounds we hear, the sensations, temperature, clothes on our skin, thought activity, stillness of mind, sense of space. Or anything that's come over the past week. So I've been, I guess I've been thinking a lot about my root teacher the past couple of weeks, and earlier in the week, I just found myself kind of remembering a bit of the way that she taught, because it's helpful for me to kind of just remember her, remember how amazing she was, and what a incredible teacher she was. But then also her style. She's very laid back, not very formal. And a lot of our practice was spent at the time, with Mahamudra, spent out on the roof. She had kind of had this small apartment on a roof of a building, and it's a bit of a roof garden that she had with potted plants and orchids and things like that. And we would sit outside with tea and just drink the tea and then settle into meditation and look out over kind of the valley between Gangtok in Sikkim and kind of Rumtek Monastery was on the opposite hill. And this is kind of amazing expanse of space. Would sit and rest into that spaciousness, and then come back, drink tea, talk, sit, and keep doing this. It was a lot of fun, very relaxed. It can be helpful to have a relationship to practice that's not tense, right? It's not fear-based. So there's a question from Sam. Sometimes as I'm watching my mind and things are coming and going, something will arise that feels qualitatively different, more like an insight or a realization, sometimes about meditation, sometimes about other things. Because these moments are rare, I feel I want to remember them, like this is important. What to do with these moments? Treat them like any other mental event or lean into them more? So, a good kind of portion of this practice is, and obviously there's the kind of open awareness aspect of it, which is what allows us to kind of recognize whatever's happening, right? So it could be, maybe we have maybe we're feeling a little stressed out or something, and about a particular task, and we just kind of find ourselves like cycling around that. So the beautiful, compassionate part of the awareness piece is that's the thing that allows us to be able to recognize that dynamic. And then the next thing is how to kind of let go, right? Not be attached to whatever it is that's coming up. So if it's some kind of cycling thought or a train of thoughts, maybe similar to this question, an experience arises that makes us think about something we may have read, and then this process of inquiry begins. It's very natural, that these things arise. The big thing is not holding on, like not being attached, not grasping at what's coming up. So even if it's a very pleasant or seemingly auspicious arisal, to allow that thing arise. And by all means, if you're going to make a mental note, go ahead and do that. And then let it go. There's a process of easing into this practice in a way that is about the relinquishment of fear of letting go. So what does it mean to let thought activity arise and then let it go? Emotion arises, right? We're feeling beings, so emotion is going to arise from time to time. Sensation, leg falls asleep, eyes get dry, whatever it is. And when the recognition of a particular thing, or maybe, it gets a little uncomfortable, even allowing that kind of discomfort to happen and then letting it go. Trying to just be loose. Right? Often there's it's almost like this predilection towards kind of treating things that arise almost in the same way we have like a muscle spasm. Like, as if we have a muscle spasm and we just kind of can't stop thinking about it, the thing that helps the most is to massage, that spot, is to allow that spot to relax. So if we can allow our mind to relax, we allow ourselves to move into letting go and not really worrying so much about, well, what happens when I do that? Does everything like disappear? Will it ever come back? Will I remember? Just see what happens. Mahamudra is kind of best when it's experimental. When we allow ourselves to just notice, wow, okay, this is coming up. It seems important. Let me just keep going. Let it go. Relax into this experience. So George writes, a devotion to learning. We are, quote, in danger of learning something. For example, Buddha, Dharma, or our natural state. Of late, my devotion is easily drawn to learning. Yes, we can be devoted to learning, right? Devoted to study, devoted to kind of understanding philosophical arguments and things like that, and and there's a tremendous amount written, in the Buddhist tradition, especially with respect to philosophy, and even with respect to mind, And again, none of that is necessarily bad. It only becomes problematic when we find ourselves grasping. And again, really, like, mind and everything, phenomena in general, can be approached in many different ways, right? We can approach all of these things through considerable learning, Nothing wrong with that. But when practicing Mahamudra, we want to be able to learn in a way that's light. Light not meaning, not effective or not particularly rigorous. But when reading about mind, not memorizing all of this stuff. Not making the descriptions feel as if they've been etched into our experience. Because there's something very strange where we will kind of just come right back to what we think we know. Oh, mind is vast. Okay, mind is vast as a statement isn't particularly helpful. And yet, when we rest into the experience of vastness, that's how we definitively know a bit about the vastness of mind. So devotion to learning is wonderful. Devotion to all things. So last week when I was bringing up these devotional songs from different faith traditions, Hindu tradition and the Sufi tradition, I brought them up because they're really good examples of traditions that make profound use of bhakti, right? Of this kind of heart opening, heart center opening, just kind of nakedness in relationship to everything that's happening. And I think that it's worth considering that there are kind of different kinds of people and that we kind of can be different. Some of us might be a little bit more intellectually suited, others might be more, quote unquote, intuitively suited. It's also important to recognize that we change over time. So if we are one particular way now, it doesn't mean we're going to be that way forever. I've had my own teacher kind of point out to me, a long time ago, how, at that time at least, my own kind of intellectual striving was really pulling me out of relationship with just learning how to be, And at different times, either in relationship to a teacher or in relationship to phenomenon as a teacher, we kind of will find ourselves vacillating between grasping and not grasping, and being intellectual in our practice, or just being very kind of innately free. So devotion to learning isn't bad. What we want to look out for, though, are when our blind spots become big. Learning about the natural state is much different than resting in the natural state. That's just true. And yet, being familiar with what the natural state may be is helpful. And yet, reading a book about the natural state is not the same as training in meditation and resting in the natural state. So Pan writes, is there a way to read devotionally, not intellectually, like Basic Space or Kunje Gyalpo? How would you read them as a devotional practice, not to learn but to be? So, my root teacher told me, and I've shared this on a number of occasions, and she told me, if you have to read something, like read it and try and read it, experience it, forget it. Read it, experience it, but don't make a big deal out of it. So then the question is, it's not even like how can you read a text devotionally? But the question is, can you read a text devotionally? So I, have this huge pile of books. I like kind of, whatever. I always have a huge pile of books, and I read them very slowly these days because I'm not particularly smart. And um, what I'll typically do is maybe read a page and put it down. Read another page, let that, sift into my being, and then put the book down. So I'll give you an example. I've got this nice little book on Mahamudra right here. And so here's a really good example of how to do this. So here, this is Tilopa's Mahamudra Upadesha. So he says in this one stanza, Mahamudra cannot be taught, but most intelligent Naropa, you have undergone rigorous austerity, with forbearance and suffering and devotion to the Guru. So most fortunate yogin, take this pith instruction to heart. Where is space supported? Upon what does it rest? Like space, Mahamudra is dependent upon nothing. Relax and settle in the continuum of unalloyed purity. And your shackles loosening, freedom is certain. Rest. So that's 2 stanzas. And then sit and rest. I mean, intellectually, I actually don't even know how you would approach this. Mahamudra cannot be taught. Elsewhere, where is space supported? Upon what does it rest? Like space, Mahamudra is dependent upon nothing. Relax and settle in the continuum of unalloyed purity. And your shackles loosening, freedom is certain. Rest. Now, so, can we read these as pointing out instructions? Like, can we just treat those 2 stanzas as if they're being whispered directly by Tilopa into our own ear? If this would be a particularly boring read if you were just like let's say you're taking a class on Mahamudra, and the person assigns Tilopa's Mahamudra instruction to Naropa in 28 Vajra verses, and you just read the whole thing. And it's like, okay, what's the next assignment? I think we forget sometimes how profound these are. Yeah, I agree. You're not really reading them otherwise. So, Camille writes, when resting in the experience of a vast open awareness, I tend to cling to it so much that I do not let mental content to occur. There's an attachment to the stillness and a fear to lose it if I get the usual content of the mind to come back. I now begin to be able to let mental content reoccur and see it come and go, and it feels great. Do I have any advice about that fear of letting mental content come back? Well, I think sometimes there's this kind of underlying anxiety that this is possibly it, or the question is this possibly it? We want it to be different. We want there's a part of us that wants our practice to be transcendent, right? Which means inherently, on some level, that there's a part of us that wants to experience things other than the way we're experiencing them right now. And connected to that, there's also kind of a kind of underlying assumption that it can't just be this easy. That we need to experience stillness. We need to have no thought. Lack of thought can arise, and it can actually come very naturally, very quickly, right? But we're not striving for lack of thought. And the lack of thought is not the absence of thought. It's the settling of activity. It's settling of the kind of just active mind, allowing us to rest into the spaciousness of awareness. Like that which is the kind of canvas or the backdrop or the ground, so to speak, upon which everything else arises from. Because our thoughts, we can chase those forever. And we can chase, and it's fine. Like, to write a book, even to write a Dharma book, involves being wrapped up in thought, right? There's this kind of, conversion process of what's happening in here onto the page, right? And it's very kind of, on one level, very intellectual process. On another level, even if it's not intellectual, it's a birthing process, which kind of requires us taking that which may be more formless and, assigning form to it. In our meditation, especially with something like Mahamudra, we want to kind of be light, and be informal, be relaxed. Right? Fear causes us to cling and contract, right? When I get scared, like a very kind of irrational fear, right? That maybe we hear something, we get some news that may be interpreted as bad. Oh, hold on a second. So the sorry. So when we become afraid, we contract, and as we contract, we cling. And so the practice really is about letting go, like letting go into spaciousness. Relax and settle into the continuum of unalloyed purity. And your shackles loosening, freedom is certain. So this unalloyed purity, right, is the nature of our minds. Fear, relates to this fact that, maybe we feel like, this can't, this, right? It's not even right here. That mind is not pure. The practice is asking us to kind of come back to and come back to and come back to this very basic, simple purity. So hopefully that's helpful. Just letting go of fear, letting go of tightness, letting go of constriction, and just letting things happen. Just give me 1 minute. I'm very sorry about this. Oh, hold on. I'm 1 second. I'm very sorry about this. Okay, I apologize for that. This has been a rather bizarre day. Just like constant crisis. Um, it's kind of hard sometimes to hold a lot of different seats. So, so Javi says, in Talopa's text, is resting in the natural mind considered an austerity? Is austerity undertaking regular practice? There's a rigorousness to that word. My question is, why is it austere? I think that I don't consider it an austerity. Um, I don't even necessarily think that there's a kind of, spiritual kind of discipline necessarily involved in this. This is basically as easy as leaning back in a comfortable chair and putting your feet up on the coffee table. Relax. This particular point about purity, so in this translation, relax and settle in the continuum of unalloyed purity, and your shackles loosening, freedom is certain. So the devotional aspect of this is open up to this process, right? Yes, and thank you, Kunga, about this. So we're not going near tapas. This isn't, this is about this isn't about trials. This isn't about engaging in practices that require tremendous discipline. This is about relaxing into your natural state, which is inherently perfect, inherently pure. There's nothing you can do to add to it to make it more pure. There's nothing you can add to make it more perfect. There's nothing you can do to make it more stainless. How can you make that which is stainless even more stainless? There should be like a commercial for mind. Now even more stainless than ever before. And the reality is that this is the fundamental nature of our mind. And as we become more acquainted with Mahamudra meditation, it's more just like coming back to this basic experience of freedom, stainlessness, fundamental purity. Might pop out of it, right? Or we might get up, session ends, and we need to, attend to all sorts of things. It could be work, it could be family, it could be a building on fire, that we happen to be in. And we just need to attend to those things. It doesn't change the nature of our mind. Our mind is still essentially pure, stainless, etc. Whenever you have the opportunity after that to settle back in, it's still there. So this isn't, and in fact, most practice, as far as I'm concerned, really doesn't need to be this like really like intense, hardcore, like uh, I'm just gonna kick the shit out of this, and um, that's gonna be it, you know. Um, and they're not separate though. Pain. What does that mean? They're not separate. You mean tapas and practice? The settled unsettled dichotomy, yes, is a stumbling block. That's correct, because so like we find sometimes I mean, you see this in the Mahamudra tradition. They definitely talk about it a little bit in Dzogchen. Is they use this metaphor of the mirror, right? So basically, the mind is basically the pure ground, right, upon which everything is reflected. Right? So thought, activity, emotion, color, you know, spatial relationship, all of that just kind of is naturally reflected in the mirror. Similarly, all of that just naturally arises within the experience of mind. Right? Sometimes, like, let's say we have a loved one who, a beloved uncle or aunt who's elderly who dies. All of a sudden, we feel sad, and we feel loss, right? Genuine loss. We feel maybe we might even feel concerned about them going through the bardo, whatever. Right? All these things happen, right? It's very natural, right? All of that stuff is still just pure, basically pure appearance being reflected in the uh, experience of mind. It's the same stuff that's uh, reflected in the mirror. The image that one sees in the mirror, just as much as that doesn't change the mirror. Anger doesn't change the mind. Intense passion doesn't change the mind. It doesn't change that basic ground upon which it arises from. No, yeah, you don't find mind outside of the reflection, though. There's not another mirror reflecting some great primordial mirror. What's referred to in those metaphors is mind itself is the mirror. The awareness aspect of mind is the mirror. All of the kind of, dancing, kind of emotion, thought, activity, all of that is mental, that is mind oriented, but that's kind of, what we could kind of describe as small mind, right? Like not mind itself. Flying a drone. So this kind of quote unquote practice of coming back to, that's translated, settling into the continuum of unalloyed purity, settling back in. We don't have to recite a list of reasons why the mind is pure. We don't have to even say a prayer. Oh, the mind is pure. Like, may I always recognize the mind is pure. The mind is pure. The Lama gives me the blessings. The mind is pure. Like, we just settle back into it. The devotion aspect of the practice is how amazing the fullness of this moment, that everything that arises is arising naturally, freely, dynamically from the experience of mind. How amazing. Yeah, that's Keith Dowman. So, another way of looking of reading this book as a devotional practice is we'll take on the next stanza. Gazing intently into the empty sky, vision ceases. Likewise, when mind gazes into mind itself, the train of discursive and conceptual thought ends, and we gain enlightenment. Gazing intently into the empty sky, vision ceases. Right? So when we're looking at a completely stainless sky, there's no referent, right? What is, I mean, I'm looking at the ceiling, but even when looking at the ceiling, where's the specific referent? But when it's expansive sky, and so this is what I was talking about before, sitting with Anizomo on her roof, is we just had, I don't know how many cubic miles of space. But when you allow yourself to practice with this kind of huge kind of spanning of space, that allows us, everything just eases into spaciousness. Right? Vision, conceptual vision, right? Me, that which is being observed, disappears. That whole process just stops, leaving us with just direct experience. Likewise, when mind gazes into mind itself, the train of discursive and conceptual thought ends, and we gain enlightenment. Allowing ourselves to just rest very freely and naturally. Mind encountering mind. And when that happens, where is the conceptual thought? Does it jump up? Hey, I'm right here. Okay, just let it happen. But what happens when conceptual thought just ceases? It's like somebody pulling the plug on your brain and everything swirls back into your heart. Yeah. See, it almost seems violent to like tear through this, right? Oh, I'm going to read this. Like you can't, I have to go slow. These days, all I do is go slow. And I have like, I just have this big pile of books, and this is how I read these days. Like the morning mist dissolving, going nowhere, simply ceasing. Incessant conceptualization ends when we see our mind's true nature. Each one of these stanzas is a pointing out instruction. Sit. And we're going to look at this let's do this. So let's see, what time is it? It's 2:54. Or at least here it is. So everybody just settle as easily as you can. And just listen. Like the morning mist dissolving, going nowhere, simply ceasing. Incessant conceptualization ends when we see our mind's true nature. We'll just sit for 5 minutes. Allow conceptualization to settle as mind becomes aware of mind. Allow mind to come back into relationship with mind. And let all conceptualization settle. So, just allowing everything to happen. So the next stanza, spaciousness has neither color nor shape, and it cannot become black or white. Like that, the mind's essence is beyond color and shape, and it cannot be spoiled by black or white deeds. This particular point really rubs some people the wrong way. What we do does not impact the mind's essential nature. It is vividly, constantly pure. And this particular point asks us to kind of get out of our weird, Abrahamic, judgy kind of way of thinking. V writes, "There's nothing between you and the furthest star. Close your eyes and travel past the Hubble images. Feels faster than the Millennium Falcon, and you become nauseous." That's realize the duality. So allowing us to recognize that if we were to get up and yell at someone, justly or unjustly, that doesn't change the nature of mind. If we feel terrible, right, really, really just like, guilty or broken, that doesn't change the nature of mind. If we puff ourselves up, oh, look at me, I know all this stuff, that also doesn't change the nature of mind. It doesn't make it better, or brighter, or faster, I like, coming back to, His Holiness the 17th Karmapa did a lot to transmit akshobhya practice, right? And so the practice of the Buddha akshobhya represents, the Vajra-like, enduring stability of mind, that Vajra-like quality. And I like that metaphor, just long, stable, constantly present. Then what does it mean to kind of just remain aware of that? We'll go through our day, we'll have every kind of reaction, get kind of tossed about this way and that way, and yet the mind is the same way. The essence of mind. Our conventional mind, right? Something, that's the play of all sorts of stuff. That's going to freak out, that's going to play, that's going to do all this stuff, right? There'll be highs and lows. But the point is not to chase after those highs and lows or worry about them, right? It's to be able to recognize that those highs and lows, are unreliable. It's kind of like this unreliable source of refuge. How amazing I am. Oh, how terrible I feel. Just like literally a display of such intensity. We tether ourselves to these kinds of highs and lows, and we force other people into the expectations associated with our highs and lows. It's really kind of absurd what we do to other people with respect to our expectations, our needs in this way. Right? Kind of beating our relationships with others and our relationship with space and time into the form of what we think it should be, forgetting that we haven't taken the time to appreciate the form for what it actually is. And again, it's not necessarily about staying anywhere. It's definitely not about checking out. It's about habituating. It's about developing confidence. Is ethics and morality, so-called actions, just convention, just an arbitrary rules of hockey? All of the highs and lows where classic faith comes into play. Well, the highs and lows, yeah. I mean, conventional faith and devotion, conventional, effort could be can be kind of applied, but again, this process of relaxing, is really like we don't necessarily need to constantly like get into a place of feeling the need to correct ourselves all the time. Or what would happen if we just settled back into that state? When we can keep coming back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and we begin to develop confidence, what we're really doing is whittling down the reality in that sense of intense urge that all of these experiences leave us to be. So just as with yidam practice, deity practice, like the process of constructing, letting it fade away, constructing, letting it fade away, constructing, letting it fade away, constructing, fading, is another way at us beginning to just cut through, the very profound reality that we assign ourselves. So it's interesting, like the Buddhist tradition is quite complex and quite vast. And, for those who want to learn as much as they can about it, good luck. Because, I mean, the majority of it hasn't even been translated into English, right? So that's, uh, that's kind of almost a little amazing, right? And yet, something like Mahamudra is so relatively simple. Even having 10 books about Mahamudra is probably too much. And just coming back. We don't necessarily need the force of the entirety of the vastness of the tradition, the religious tradition, to help us develop a relationship to Mahamudra. Just coming back into this basic practice is really all we need. And we can run and we can chase and we can, buy more books and, read and read and read. But that doesn't really help us. That doesn't really push us deeply into the practice. Unless we get so frustrated that we're like, what, man, like this is all a bunch of bull. I've read all these books, I've spent all this money, and still I'm just as confused as I was before. That's good. Then you should sit down and practice. Or just pick up that one book or one instruction, right? Not even a whole book. So this instruction is basically not even 5 full sides of a page. The darkness of 1,000 aeons is unable to dim the crystal clarity of the sun's core. Likewise, Aeons of samsara have no power to veil the clear light of mind. You know, can we even like let ourselves feel good about ourselves enough to appreciate this? Like, the darkness of 1,000 aeons is unable to dim the crystal clarity of the sun's core. Likewise, aeons of samsara have no power to veil the clear light of mind. So we'll keep going and going and going, thinking I'm samsaric, I suck, I don't have realization, blah blah. It's been thousands of years since I have had good practice, and that still doesn't change. That does not alter the purity of mind. Yeah, Bhumi Sparsha merch. We could have flashcards, but that's not even good. We could like send people the ashes of flashcards that we've burned, and then ask people to read those. It's important to kind of play all this stuff up because we can be really like we can work ourselves into a strange hole, being overly kind of obsessed with gaining knowledge. And we see this, in Milarepa's story with Rinpoche, like ever seeking more and more and more and more, like ever seeking like knowledge of grammar, knowledge of black magic, you know. Yes, it's exactly like that. The snake and the apple are illusory, and nothing has changed. You know. Yeah, and Channel Ground and Eden are exactly the same. Yeah, at first that's just kind of intellectual, kind of, you know, uh, you know, intellectual statement. But as we begin to kind of experience into that, there's like Saraha and in a number of his songs kind of comes back to this fact that, Mahamudra is all about recognizing that samsara and nirvana are exactly the same. Put them side by side. Exactly the same. And this kind of goes directly back to this stanza. Where is space supported? Upon what does it rest? Like space, Mahamudra is dependent upon nothing. Relax and settle into the continuum of unalloyed purity, and your shackles loosening, freedom is certain. How can we just let ourselves quit freaking out about every little thing? Yeah, so it's this fixing, it's this need for things to be better, it's this need for things to be anything other than this. So it can't be this. This is just too ordinary. Mind can't be this ordinary. Yes, giving and taking are both so tiresome. I think it should be giving and taking are such a drag. That could be like the Bumi Sparsha bumper sticker. uh, yes, it's true. When you have a hammer, every just looks like a nail. Yes, yeah. See, we've got our merch, folks, primed up. So being loose. Yeah. So this sense of ease, and so this is what Anizarmo meant when she told me, like, if you have to read, read and forget. Because if I were like, let me see if I can do this. Okay, so actually, it's funny because I was like looking for a line to read in a dogmatic way, like this is the way it is, like it has to be like this, and if you know, um, and then of course I found this one, free of intellectual conceits, disavowing dogmatic principles, the truth of every school and scripture is revealed. Right? Disavowing dogmatic principles. It's like this. Yeah, I mean, I hear you, Pain, but the this accomplishment, rushing, 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 and it isn't until we fall down usually that and then we're like, oh my God, I'm not doing it, and then you're like, oh my God, that's okay, you know. Sometimes we need schedules, sometimes we don't. Yeah, but so not having too extreme a view in either direction, being able to be playful, being able to, and playfulness is not hard. I mean, not easy these days. Everybody is very definitive. Oh, everything sucks. I think everything is terrible. Everything is rooted in oppression. Everything is rooted in oppression, especially if that's all you can see. Right? Everything is just this way or that way or that way or this way. This is why meditation is so important, because it forces us to see the mind, experience the mind, recognize the way that we take everything so seriously in what arises within the mind and emotion. And then we project that onto everything, causing other people's suffering. Right? And then that usually just triggering another reaction. And when we look at just how much how much energy we expend, it's amazing. And that's basically what samsara is when we're just chugging and chugging and chugging and reacting and saying this is the way that is, that's the way that is, this is that, blah, 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 blah. I do like this, I don't like that, I can't eat this, I can't eat that, I can't drink this, I can't drink that. That's good, that's bad, that's cute, that's ugly, over and over, over and over and over and over again. As opposed to just allowing things to be. And yeah, easier said than done? Maybe, but it doesn't mean don't try. Everything is easier said than done. I used to think I had seasonal depressive disorder, and then I went to India for a year and spent like the monsoon in Sikkim, and the clouds from the Bay of Bengal just kind of press up against the Darjeeling and Sikkim area, and it just is like rains like nonstop for 3 months, and that's the best antidote for seasonal depressive disorder. Just having to let that whole thing play out. Okay, like now I love the rain. I find rain comforting. But it was this process of like 3 months especially living in a room where the windows didn't have glass, so everything was damp all the time. Clouds came into the windows. Um, just being, trying to write a letter and like the ink would run because the paper was damp. That's how to, you know, that's how to get over that. That's how to, you just, oh, it can't still be raining. Oh, God, it is. Well, tomorrow it better not rain. Oh, it is. It is. It is. It is. Meditation is very much like that. Sit down and let it play out. Let the process happen. Let it play out. But don't solidify. Sometimes we're afraid of dying. Sometimes we're afraid of waking up. You know? So I'll say one thing before we wrap up. Um, I was telling this to somebody earlier this morning, but uh, I was reading a book. I'm trying to forget, but in this book, it was actually it wasn't even said by the author, but it just kind of led me to kind of remember something, um, and that's that. When the Buddha was enlightened, the Buddha taught using the conventional language and terminology and cultural idiom of the time, which was that of India, quite a long time ago. Right? And that's how when we have this kind of vast experience of non-duality, the expressing of that becomes an issue to some extent. And so for a little while, the Buddha did consider not teaching. Oh, like what's the point, man? This is like beyond words. I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. If I do, this is going to be a nightmare because words fail, and they often do. And he realized that that wasn't the most skillful thing, and he started to teach, and he taught, and he used conventional language, terminology. Some of what he taught was brand new. Some of it was, using the existing conceptual framework, and kind of philosophical bases, so that people could understand, right? And that's great. But it's safe to say that the actual experience had, right, transcended all of that. And then it's very interesting to consider that all of that which was taught then was then codified. And even now in 2020, like we worry about practicing that perfectly. you know? And so the nice thing about Mahamudra is it's coming back to trying to touch and taste into that original experience that the Buddha had. You know? So just letting ourselves let go of form, letting ourselves let go of emptiness, and just experiencing directly. Without worrying about bells, without worrying about books, without worrying about Dharma clothes, without worrying other things. You know? So I bring this up to point out that sometimes we will hold the tradition more tightly than it is intended to be held. And that's something to kind of keep in mind. I'm not saying throw everything away, but again, just coming back to the basic grasping. Oh, if I don't do everything perfectly, then it won't work. So, in any event, hopefully this was helpful. A little experimental, perhaps. Right now, I want to dedicate the merit, any kind of benefit from this limited talk, the alleviation of the suffering of all beings. May all beings attain the state of Mahamudra in this life. May samsara and nirvana be seen as indistinguishable. May we begin to just ease naturally into the recognition of mind as it is, so that all grasping and fear and anxiety and tightness evaporates like mist, leaving us feeling sated and in direct relationship to everything that arises. So thank you all. Wishing you all a lovely weekend and a lovely week until next week. So take care.